Robert Hathaway is a public policy fellow and Asia Program Director Emeritus at the Wilson Center. That's a great title when you're Emeritus anything, isn't it, Bob? He's the author of this new book, The Leverage Paradox, Pakistan and the U.S. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, John.
Let me ask you about sort of a current characterization of U.S.-Pakistan relations. A quote from the book, you say, "Few countries have frustrated American diplomats and policymakers more." Is that still the case today?
Even more so. I mean, the very first thing Donald Trump did on January 1 when he got out of bed was an out-of-the-blue tweet criticizing Pakistan, followed 3 days later by a suspension of all U.S. military assistance to Pakistan. So, yeah, it's a problem today, just as it was when I was writing this book last year.
And his recent move to withhold payments, it's another deja vu all over again, another attempt to use a strong arm tactic, to use direct pressure, monetary pressure in this case. Trump even talking tough about it, going to do it our way or the highway. I'm paraphrasing. Does that work?
Apparently not, because we're in this situation all over again. You're exactly right. This is not the first time, nor the second time, nor even the fifth time that we have suspended U.S. assistance to Pakistan. In every instance, we think the Pakistanis really need our assistance, or more broadly, our friendship. This is going to compel them to do X, Y, or Z. It doesn't work.
Well, why doesn't it work? I mean, on the surface, it would appear that it should work, right? That if you have major assets to offer and a country needs those, that they may be a little more compliant.
Well, first of all, it's not major assets. Relative to Pakistani needs, relative to what other donors, including the international financial institutions like the IMF and the World Bank, relative to other sources of aid, it's really not much money. The Pakistanis value the money, but they don't value it enough to feel compelled to take steps that they think are fundamentally contrary to their own national interests. And that's why it doesn't work.
Is what we understand and what you explain about leverage and influence unique to Pakistan in this case, or are these sort of universal laws of engagement?
I think they are every day for every country. Other countries use leverage every day. It's part of the toolkit of diplomacy. Small countries seek to use leverage against smaller countries, but also against larger countries, including in this U.S.-Pakistan relationship. We assume, most people assume, that great power gives us great leverage. But in fact, smaller countries are on a regular basis able to both deflect leverage attempts by larger countries and also to exert leverage against larger countries by themselves.
And I want to ask you about a specific incidents in this relationship. But first, along these lines of overestimating your influence or your power or your ability to flex your muscles, it seems like the United States does that consistently. Or we expected of others, a contemporary example, North Korea, China equation. We seem to think China can just flick a switch and have North Korea do its bidding, as much as the Chinese and other expert observers protest and say it's not that simple. Are we uniquely guilty of overplaying or overestimating our hand?
No.
Everybody does it?
All great powers believe that they can use their strength, measured in military budgets, measured by terms of the economy. They can use their
soft
strength.
Power?
Absolutely. They can use their strength to entice, compel other countries to do their bidding. So we're certainly not unique in this. We're unique only in the sense that in the recent past, since 1945 and the end of the Second World War, since 1991 and the collapse of the Soviet Union, we had unchallenged power. And so that's really the only thing that's really uniqueness. All countries seek to exert or to deflect leverage attempts.
The specific thing I wanted to ask you about is Musharraf's reaction after 9/11, where Pakistan was now in a position to exert some leverage over the U.S. How did that play out?
Well, they did. We went to Pakistan the next day after 9/11, and in essence said, you're either going to support us in our efforts to bring to justice those responsible for the 9/11 attacks, or else we're going to regard you as much as an enemy as we regard Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Well, Musharraf didn't say yes and he didn't say no, though the conventional wisdom after the fact is Musharraf had no choice but to say yes. But in fact, it was much more subtle.
That's one of your rules that you identify of the exercise of leverage, is to hedge, essentially,
Exactly.
to not say yes or no.
Exactly. Musharraf very skillfully used an American need, the need for Pakistani cooperation, as we began to think about a war in Afghanistan. And remember, Afghanistan is landlocked. The best way to get there, particularly send supplies there, is through Pakistan. But in addition, we wanted intelligence cooperation, we wanted other forms of security cooperation from the Pakistanis. Musharraf understood that Pakistan could fill an American need, and therefore, rather than simply saying on September 12th, when first presented with this American demand, okay, I'm going to do it, instead of saying that, he said, okay, well, what can you give us in return? We'll help satisfy your needs. You, in turn, help satisfy both Pakistani needs, but also Musharraf's personal needs. He was a military general who had overthrown a democratically elected government. He was persona non grata throughout much of the world, and one of the things he was able to get in the post-9/11 partnership between the United States and Pakistan was a personal legitimacy for his own rule in Pakistan.
So the notion that with great power comes great influence, that's one story. The story that seems to be more applicable, based on what you're saying, is more the Davy and Goliath story.
We assume, most people assume, that great power gives us great leverage. If that were true, the Castro brothers wouldn't be a thorn in the American side for more than 50 cents. Kim Jong-un wouldn't be regularly thumbing his nose at the United States today. Again, it's just a more sophisticated interplay, as I've tried to suggest in this book.
So, given all the things that you've made clear, how do you exercise power effectively? I think the word you used in one point in the book, if I could find in my notes, more seduction than compulsion. Which is somewhat counterintuitive to the exercise of power.
It is, and that's one of the things I had in mind when I used the word paradox in describing the phenomenon.
Less is more, almost.
Almost. One should try to build on and create relationships, to create a sense of obligation from the other party, to create a sense of shared purpose, so that the other party wants to help you rather than feels compelled to help you. And that's what I meant when I suggested leverage should be as much about seduction as compulsion. The most effective use of leverage is when the target country barely recognizes it's being leveraged.
Is one of the other, you come up with a list of sort of elements of leverage or rules for exerting leverage or using leverage. One of them is really fascinating. I think it's the last one you list, that tone and style matter, and then you emphasize that, period, a lot, period. That would seem to be something that is continually underestimated. Just how you talk to people.
Well, I think it is, and again, I simply refer you back to President Trump's tweet on January 1st of this year. Now, there's a lot of people that think that it might be time to distance ourselves from the Pakistanis.
Are you in that crowd?
Yes.
Okay.
However, Trump explained his actions in that tweet and then the days later in suspending aid to Pakistan as a means to induce better behavior from the Pakistanis. Well, the last thing you're going to do if you're trying to induce another party to another country to perform as you want them to perform is to insult them publicly. He called them liars. He accused them of being deceitful. Maybe they are. Maybe they have been. But you don't publicly humiliate a proud people in a proud country if you want them to cooperate. cooperate with you. And that's what I meant, part of what I meant when I said tone and style matter a whole lot.
So if you had the ears of world leaders for a moment, and you could summarize for them what's the most important thing they need to think about when they attempt to exert their leverage, what is the bottom line message you would provide them with?
Well, I think the bottom line is that in the harsh world of international politics, power does matter. All of us want to have power, but power by itself is not sufficient to get another party, another country to do as you want. And moreover, it's the manner in which you wield your power. And that goes back to what I said about tone and style. I think that a great power needs to be humble in the sense that it needs to recognize that it's not simply the power itself which enables it to succeed. It's how it uses its power, how it understands the priorities, the domestic politics of the other side, how it can work together with the other party to build a win-win situation, which is, by the way, a phrase I don't use in that book, but I could. How to get the other party to believe that it's in the interest of the other party to take the steps that we would like them to take.
Well, Bob, it's a terrific formula for how to better utilize power when you have it. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. I would recommend the book to anyone who wants to think or learn more about these issues.
Thanks, John.